Hey, how you doing? This is RJ. I know I said in my last video that I wasn't going to concentrate anymore on the Women of Marvel panel that was at the San Diego Comic-Con and that was put into the Women of Marvel podcast, which I said it was a monthly one, but actually I'm looking at it now. It might be weekly. There are so many of them. I think they're up to like 140 or something around there for how many they have out yet. But after clarifying my thoughts with those other two videos, I went back and looked over to see if there was anything else that I had missed and that was something that was actually pretty big. And I did find something that was pretty big, and I had forgotten about it because it's at the end and when they're talking and answering questions. And I think they're being a little more honest when they're actually answering the questions because they don't have a script really to go by, not as nailed down a script at the very least as when they had it in the rest of the panel. And Sana Amanat says a few things which I think will be shocking to most people if you actually sit and listen to them, because I'm going to read them to you in a few minutes. And it has to do with what she sees as a successful book. Now, you and I and any normal person out there in the world would think of something as successful. It's a product. It should be successful if people like it and it sells well. Well, for Sana Amanat, it doesn't matter if it sells well. It doesn't matter if people like it or not. She still considers these things successful. Now, how in the world can they have this mindset? I'm going to go over that after I read you these couple of excerpts from the panel itself. Now, I am going to give you the timestamp, and I'm going to read it in her voice, her intonation, because it doesn't make any sense unless I do that. I'm not making fun of her. I am just having to read it that way because I can't cut out all the ums and ahs and whatever, the repetitions, because it doesn't make any sense then. So this is timestamp 3540 from the podcast. And this is Sana Amanat talking, and she's talking about canceled books. And most specifically in these quotes, she's talking about America Chavez and other canceled books, but that's specifically the one that they mention over again is America Chavez. So she says, there are books like that, canceled books. There are books like that which they make it out, and maybe they don't last, sort of, 50 issues, but they last for the time that they do. And I consider that a success and a special moment. Because then, hopefully, people will go buy it in a collection and a trade. And we don't consider books like that any less successful than a book like Avengers, because of the impact it can have in other spaces and other markets. And we're also trying to make sure that we are telling stories across all of our platforms. And then she goes on for a moment to talk about some of these other platforms. And she talks about these new YA and middle grade novels that are coming out for Squirrel Girl. And after she stops that, she continues on with her thought from before and says, but there are all these other places where if these characters don't necessarily sell as well as we want, we do believe in them and we will find other spaces to take them. And that's really what Marvel Rising is all about. America Chavez doesn't currently have her own comic series anymore, but we love her and we really want to do more with her, and that's really why she's a part of the cast. Now, I'm going to give you one more quote. This is from timestamp 4444. Again, talking about America Chavez. Someone asked a question about whether or not she's going to be in the same format, basically, as she is in the comics, even though she's in a cartoon. And the answer is, well, with Marvel in general, I will say it's always ebbs and flows of our series, and what works, and what's selling, and what's not selling, and what not. But it doesn't mean, again, like I said before, it doesn't mean that they're not successful. So we are taking those characters into these other places, and we also honestly want to do more. And then she rambles for a little bit, and she concludes by saying, but we need your support. So, just take those in for just a minute. Take those in for just a minute and think about what she's just saying. And there's a lot to unpack here. Really there is. And I don't think there's any way I'm going to stick to my 10 to 15 minute new format with this one, because if you just listen to what they said, holy Moses, is that a mouthful and a half. Because She is literally saying that it doesn't matter if a book is canceled. It doesn't matter if a book does poorly. It doesn't matter if there isn't an audience to keep it going. They don't count that as being unsuccessful, or even less successful than something that sells as well as Avengers. So, what does that mean? Well, let's take a look at it really quickly at the first and see what it means in itself. It means that, when we all heard that C.B. Cebulski was taking over Marvel and he started to cancel books, we all cheered because we thought, finally, we're getting rid of these things. But you know what? Marvel's plans, according to Sana Amanat right here, her plans and Marvel's plans is that these books are never going to go away. No matter how many times they're canceled, they are never going to go away. Just like I said in my last couple of videos about this panel, there are these women creators who are most probably given safe spaces. And these safe spaces are either their characters or their comics themselves, and they're never actually going to go away. And I think this is confirmation right here of that fact exactly. She is saying that America Chavez that did so poorly in the comics that it had to be canceled, that there wasn't an audience there to keep it going, but they love her and they want to do more with her. Notice they. Now, I don't think they're so narcissistic in to say that they're saying they in terms of just those people on the panel or just Sana Amanat. I think they're speaking of they as Marvel Entertainment. I don't think they're speaking as Disney. I'm thinking they're speaking as Marvel Entertainment. And they're saying they love her. They want to continue on with her. Now, notice they. Got nothing to do with the customer base. Nothing to do with what the customers want, but what they want. Again, she has done this a number of times and used that language. What they want. They want to take her in a number of different places. So no matter how many times she gets canceled, no matter how poor the sales are, no matter how much people scream that they don't want this, she's never going away, according to Sana Amanat. They're going to shove her into some other venue. Either it's going to be, the new one now is going to be into the cartoons, or it could be the movies, or it could be television shows other than cartoons. It could be YA novels like Squirrel Girl is going into. It could be just plain merchandise. It could be any of these things, or all of them. But they're going to move her around. If she gets canceled, move her around a little bit until they can convince somebody that she should have another shot at a book, and then they're going to bring her back into a book. So, right now, we need to understand, as Marvel readers, as comic readers, they have no intention of listening to us whatsoever. They have no intention to listening to the market whatsoever. They are going to bring these things back time after time after time because they want to do so. And they consider them successful. Now, I'm going to get into that in a minute or two. But let's dig a little deeper into this. Dig a little deeper into it. Try to use these quotes and maybe a couple of others that Sana Amanat has given in some of her other interviews and see if we can try and figure out what her definition of success actually is. Because she's not using the same definition that we're using. She's not using the same definition that anybody else out in the world would be using. So what in the world is her definition of success? Now, I would argue, and I think I have some evidence in arguing this, that what she sees of as successful is a character that is progressive, that has quote-unquote a progressive narrative going along with it. It doesn't matter how well they sell, as long as they're progressive in this far leftist idea of progressive, then that's a successful character. Because she makes this statement, and it seems like a ridiculous statement that makes no sense, but think about it for a minute. She makes this statement. So, maybe they don't last sort of, 50 issues, but they last for the time that they do. And I consider that a success and a special moment. Now, but they last for the time that they do. What in the world does that mean? Well, that means that they got these things out there. They got these things out there and they got people to see them. It's successful if they can get these things out there and get people to see them. Why is that successful? Because I would argue, and I think I do have some evidence at the very least, that as I was talking before about her branding Marvel as a lifestyle brand. Lifestyle brands have to be generated and put around a subsection of the culture, a subgroup, a subculture. And quite specifically, I think right here you got evidence that quite specifically their idea of what subculture that they're selling to is quite specifically not comic buyers. They don't care what we like. They don't care what we purchase. They don't care how well or how poor these things do. They don't care. They are not selling to us. Our subculture as comic buyers is not what they're selling to. Who they're selling to is SJWs. That's the subculture that they're trying to appeal to. Quite literally, that's what they're trying to appeal to as their new customer base. And it makes sense if you think about it in those terms, especially with what she's saying right now. She's saying as long as they get those things out there, then she considers them successful. And why? Well, again, I had said this in one of my other videos, and I'll go over it just really quickly again here. I think that these people, these SJWs, are certainly the useful idiots of socialist communists, and they have these socialist communist ideas stuck in the back of their mind. Now, socialist communists always used to try to take over the big boy on the block, and it was usually governments, but it could also be things like churches and stuff like that, large ones, so large multinational things. They're trying to take over national governments, and they would use their resources in order to push their narrative. But I think the new form of that, the SJW form of that, is to forget about governments and to go after big corporations. So they go after corporations like Disney, and they take it and they use it to generate money for them. They use the subsection of it like Marvel, and they put out their propaganda, their socialist communist propaganda, and they use Disney's basically cachet that there are always going to be people paying for Disney stuff to continue to generate them money, even though they're in a money-losing part of the industry. Because why? They're using the industry as a political tool. Quite literally. I would say that Marvel is being used by Sana Amanat and by the people who are running Marvel as a political tool. I don't think that Disney wants them to use it that way or is quite wise to the fact that they're using it that way, but they're using it as a political tool. Not as something that is a business, not something that is for entertainment, but they're using it as a political tool. And as long as the things that they put out there, which are these progressive kind of characters, which are, as she said in the Fast Company interview, pushing ideas, then that's all that they need. They just need to get them out there. Once they get them out there, then they're going to move them around everywhere else, and so that they're always out there and they're never going to go away. They're going to push these leftist ideas. Now, I've always talked about them pushing leftist ideas, and you want some evidence of that? There's some evidence in this. Oh, there is some evidence in this, because at the very least in two separate places they talk about what I would call far leftist ideas. At one of these places, one of the presenters, one of the people on the panel talks about, and they never actually use specific language, they never actually use names, but they're talking about the Parkland shootings and how those two kids, so he's talking about David Hogg and the other one, are doing such great things out there in the world now. So the great things, obviously, that David Hogg is trying to do is to get the Second Amendment repealed. So they think that that is a great thing. So yeah, far leftist. And there's another one where one of the, I think the voice actress for Kamala Khan, she says that she quite specifically, and there's a couple of people in the background that are booing, but they kind of tried to drown that out. She says, quite specifically, and these are her words around, I think the timestamp was about 14 in the podcast. She says, there is a Muslim ban. So she never actually says the word Trump, but she says, there is a Muslim ban in our country right now. And she repeats that twice. And then she says, and we're not out in the streets. And we're not stopping this. And then she goes on with what she said before and what she says right after this, in the fact that media matters, that this whole Muslim ban thing and this whole idea that Muslims are in any way, shape, or form violent is just propagated by dishonest media, and she is going to counter that with her portrayal of Kamala Khan, and she's going to help that with putting Kamala Khan out there. So, quite specifically, what she's saying is that they are trying to use media in order to put out these positive ideas, so-called, again, pushing ideas. It doesn't matter if they're pushing positive ideas, like they say, like Sana Amanat said in her Fast Company interview, they're still pushing ideas. See, they're using what they have in media as a political actor. They're not using it for entertainment. They're using it as a political actor. They're using it as a political actor, and they just want to get it out there so that people can see it. They want it out there that says, but they last for the time that they do, and they consider that as success. So that's what they think is successful. They're putting these things out there. As long as they're out there, as long as they're getting their political message out there, then they think that they're successful. Because she said, at timestamp 14, I think it was again, she said, we're not out in the streets. We are not stopping this. So what are they trying to do? Being a political actor, what they're trying to do is to get this message out there. They're trying to get their quote-unquote progressive message out there with people like America Chavez and Kamala Khan, and then they're trying to do that in order to push people out into the streets to stop these things. So they literally want people out in the streets stopping laws that are enacted by the country legally and through the court system. They want people jumping the queue of the legal system out in the streets stopping these things. And if that is not trying to push a political agenda and a far leftist political agenda, I don't know what is. That quite specifically is what they're talking about here. So again, let's go back to the question. What in the world does Sana Amanat consider successful? What is her definition of successful? Well, I would argue, with all of these things that are sitting in front of me, her idea of successful is that she has characters which have ideas implanted in them, because I would say, and as I have said in a number of my videos, that these characters are not actually characters themselves. They don't write these characters as characters. As a writer, I'm telling you right now, they're not actually characters. They are ideas in a mask, is what they are. And they're just ideas. And Sana Amanat, she said, they want them to push ideas. These characters are supposed to push ideas. What kinds of ideas? Well, they want these characters out there to push far leftist ideas because they are trying to use their media, which they are part of, as a political actor, not as a company, not as anything that's going to be successful in the market. Those definitions are far away from what she thinks successful is. She doesn't even consider bad sales and cancellations of things to be something that hampers success, because she thinks success is just getting these characters out there with their message that's attached to them, because they're just ideas in a mask, and so they can rile up people in this political manner. Now, if you didn't believe me with my other two videos, my last two videos, where I said we need to get rid of these people, and we need to get rid of them fast, and we need to drive them out and do everything we can to drive them out, I think after listening to these couple of quotes, you might agree with me now that really these people need to be driven out, because their idea of success is not even in the same ballpark of what everyone else thinks success is. But there is a little bit of a silver lining to this. And the silver lining comes again in this video, because you hear Sana Amanat saying things like, but we need that support. She also says in other places, she's saying in other places that she's trying to prompt the audience and say, but we need that support, but we need you to go out there and buy those comics and buy the merch. She specifically says, and buy the merch. And then she goes and talks about this new, I think it was Captain Marvel jacket that's coming out that everybody needs. But the thing is, here's the thing. And again, this, for right here, what I'm talking about, this is my instincts telling me, this is not argumentation right here. But I think you can hear it in her voice that she's physically uncomfortable hawking wares. She doesn't really sound comfortable at all when she's saying, but you got to go out and buy the merch, and she's trying to sell these things, because she does it a number of times, and each time she sounds off, not like she does in the rest of the in the podcast at all. She sounds a little bit off. And why? Because, well, she wants to use these things to be political actors. She doesn't care about any of this capitalist nonsense, and so when she actually has to push these things to try to get them to sell, well, she's a little bit uncomfortable in doing that. And the silver lining is right there. The silver lining is the fact that She sounds to me to be uncomfortable in doing so, but she's still doing so. Why would she still be doing so if she does not want to do so, and she is basically in control of the company of Marvel, and she doesn't have to do things that she doesn't want to? Well, the silver lining is this. Disney, although it is a left-leaning company, does not care about any of these things if it starts to impact their bottom line. Disney is a money maker. They are very left-leaning, but I'm looking at them and their past, and it shows that, you know what, if their left-leaning ideas start to get in the way of their making money, they want them out of there. And I think that Sana Amanat is getting pressure from Disney at this point that you better start getting these things to make money, because you keep telling us that they're going to make money, but we're not seeing that. And I think that's part of what she was doing when she declared that Marvel should be a lifestyle brand. Because if Marvel is a lifestyle brand, then she's sort of cooking the books in that she's saying that, look, we do have success for these things. Why do we have success? Because people are shouting they want more, they want more, they want more. Why? Because SJWs are very good at shouting, this is what we want, this is what we want. But when it actually comes time to doing anything about it, they never do. So they never actually buy these books. They never actually buy the merch. But they're out there shouting, yes, we want more America Chavez. Yes, we want more Kamala Khan. They are shouting these things, and Sana Amanat is saying, because she's rigged the books, to say that this is our new audience. Our new audience is these SJWs, right? We don't talk about those Comicsgate people or the people who read comics. No, SJWs are our audience, and they're shouting for more. So she's probably showing this to Disney and saying, look, we have this great audience out there that wants more and more of this stuff. Therefore, there is money out there. We just have to hit the right vein. But every time she tries, it's not hitting a vein. And she's trying to move the characters around to say, well, it'll work in this one. Well, it'll work in that one. Well, we just got to move it over here because people are shouting for more. So obviously the money's out there. But the SJWs are not buying these things. So they're never actually putting out the money. So she's starting to have to hawk wares in order to tell people, hey, look, come on, you got to buy, you got to buy. But nobody's buying these things. And that's a silver lining, because I think that Disney is going to start putting more and more pressure on her and on Marvel to start making money. Because you know what? As I had said before, as a lifestyle brand, comics are in some way have always been a subculture, because a lifestyle branding works with subcultures. But normal culture, lifestyle branding doesn't work with normal everyday culture. Why? Because normal everyday culture goes from one fad to another fad to another fad, and they just move on. And I am pretty sure, looking at the Marvel movies right now, that we have reached the saturation point for the normies. They are pretty much going to start getting sick and tired of any comic book, heroes, movies, merch, anything else over the next couple of years. I would say it will take about 3 to 5 years, and then this whole thing is going to fall. I would say it'd probably be when the Captain Marvel movie comes out. That's my guess. But it's going to be at some point there. I say we already reached the saturation point, but there's going to be a falling off, a massive falling off. Just the same way that if someone tried to make a movie today about, I don't know, let's say sparkly vampires, nobody's going to care about it. Why? Because everybody's there saying to themselves, yeah, we've been there, we've done that, go away. And they're going to be the same thing about Marvel soon, and about all comic book stuff out there soon. And it's going to go back to obscurity. And because it's going to go back to obscurity, they need these things to take off. They need to have other avenues that they're going to make money in. They know that they have to work with subcultures. And if they don't get the money start to come out of these subcultures, and these things from mass saturation are going to start falling off in the mainstream, then these people in their companies, their sub-companies like Marvel Entertainment, are not doing their job, and they're going to start feeling the pressure. I think they've already started to feel the pressure. I think with Sana Amanat hawking wares like this and being physically uncomfortable talking about them, I can see it in the video, that, she is getting pressure right now, and I think that's the silver lining. Who would ever think that Disney would be the silver lining to owning Marvel, because really it's been such a nightmare from the beginning. But that is what is going on with Marvel right now. And that is the core of why we need to get rid of these people from Marvel. Because, quite literally, when a book is canceled, when it has no audience, they still consider that a success because it simply got out there. And they're never going to go away in their minds. These poor characters, poorly written characters, poor stories who go nowhere and nobody is buying, they are going to keep pumping them out in either the comics, in new volumes, in new number ones, or in other venues, and whatever other venue that's going to be, they'll just come up with a new one. It'll be YA books, it'll be cartoons, it'll be something else. And they're never going to stop pushing this garbage at us unless these people are gotten rid of. Anyway, that was a bit of a rant, and it was a bit of a long rant, but I think it was very important that everybody understands that these are specifically the lines, what she says in those panels, and that Marvel has not tried to hide, but purposely put up on their website to say, yeah, this is what we are. And I'll give you those timestamps again for those two quotes if you want to go listen to them themselves. They are from 3540 and from 4444 of the Marvel podcast, which the link is in the description of this video. If you want to go listen to those themselves and to make sure that I'm actually giving you the straight truth of what she's saying there, go and listen to them. Anyway, it's time for me to stop talking because I've been talking for much too long now. I will have a new topic for my next video. So, if I gave you anything new to think about, and I think I might have given some people something new to think about, hit like, hit subscribe. I got a good boost of subscriptions over the last week, and then it sort of died down a little bit. So I'd like to keep on going with some more subscribers. That's great. If you share the link, you let people know. If you actually are finding these interesting, let other people know. Let other people know, and then hopefully we can use these ideas to make our comics better. We can get rid of these people and make comic books better. All right. I'll see you later. Bye.